Welcome to Evidence to Excellence, news in neuroplasticity and rehab powered by the Recovery Project. We want to personally welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're glad that you're here because this podcast is designed to keep you updated on what's new in research and evidence in the neurorehabilitation world. Now, here's your host, Polly Swingle, CEO and co-owner of the Recovery Project.
Welcome to our second podcast today, Evidence to Excellence, where we're going to talk about spinal cord injury today. Our primary focus is going to be talking about spinal cord injury with a chronic injury. So today I am super excited to have two wonderful people with us, and we also have one other person that will be joining us a little bit later via phone. So let me introduce who we have with us today. First, we have TJ Hosa, who is a PT, and he received his doctorate of physical therapy from Ohio University. He also has a bachelor's of exercise science from Ohio State University, so we won't take that personally that we're in Michigan here and you are a Buckeye, but that's okay. TJ has practiced internationally as well as a lead physical therapist for the Recovery Project. He oversees the spinal cord injury program here at the Recovery Project and also guides an interdisciplinary team in evidence-based comprehensive rehab for survivors of spinal cord injury and traumatic brain injury. Welcome, TJ, and thanks for joining us today, bringing all of your expertise.
Thanks.
We also have Charlie Parkhill. I'm going to give the background with Charlie and not talk about my personal relationship with him, but we'll get there. So Charlie, in 1972, graduated from Western University with a degree in accounting, right, and received his CPA license at Plant Moran. In 1993, he founded several companies, primarily providing financial and project management consulting to architectural and engineers throughout the country, growing a client base to more than 500 firms. That's impressive.
Thank you.
In 1998, vacationing in Mexico, Charlie was involved in an ocean wave accident resulting in an incomplete spinal cord injury. That was a C4, C5 quadriplegia. In 1999 through 2004, Charlie was dedicated to his rehab process to achieve ultimate outcomes that he could. And that's kind of when I met Charlie, was in that time frame, would you say. So I met Charlie when he was a patient of mine when he was first injured, and I was his primary physical therapist many, many years ago. In 2004, with myself, we co-founded the Recovery Project. Just a little bit of background about the Recovery Project, since I have time and I can talk about that since I have Charlie with me today, that the Recovery Project is the largest non-hospital-based neurological rehab facility in Michigan. We offer physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and massage. We have clinics in 3 locations, Livonia, Clinton Township, and Lansing. We have seen 10,000 past and present patients within our time of existence here at the Recovery Project. We see all kinds of patients with spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, MS, Parkinson's, stroke, and amputees. And this is so cool. We were named the coolest 100 places to work in Michigan by Cranes in 2017 and 2018. In 2007, Charlie and his wife Mary founded the Charlie A. Parkhill Foundation for Spinal Cord Injury Rehab, where they have raised over $500,000 that have been awarded to individuals to provide them therapy when their resources are exhausted. So that has just been huge for the patients out there across the country. So thank you for doing that and joining us today.
Part of that.
Well, you're welcome. We also have in a little bit Dr. Gianna Rodriguez, who will be joining us via phone. She is a physiatrist and an associate professor in Ann Arbor for the University of Michigan. She is an MD that has a specialization in spinal cord injury and has been practicing for over 26 years. She spends most of her time seeing patients, as well as Charlie is one of her patients, at the University of Michigan Physical Medicine and Rehab Center on Eisenhower Parkway in Ann Arbor, and she'll be joining us in a few minutes. So before we get started, I want to go ahead and thank our sponsor for today, which is Restorative Therapies. So thank you so much for sponsoring us today, and we'll talk a little bit more about them in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper here with spinal cord injury. So TJ, let's start with you. Why don't you share with us a little bit about what is a spinal cord injury?
So a spinal cord injury, like in the name, it's any sort of damage to your spinal cord. So your spinal cord essentially runs down from your neck or your brainstem down to the lower part of your back, and it's protected by your vertebral column. Well, any sort of damage, it could be trauma or non-trauma to that spinal cord, can result in loss of motor or sensory sensation below that level of injuries. And that's the kind of other part of spinal cord injury. There's different levels, and depending on which level injury you're at, it affects if you're able to use your arms, your trunk, your legs.
So what is the most common cause of a spinal cord injury?
So the most common cause, what we see a lot here at the Recovery Project, is from motor vehicle accidents. About 38% or so spinal cord injuries are from that. So it kind of maybe makes you want to think twice about texting or being distracted while you're driving your car. And then the next most common cause is falls, which is around 31%. And the actual number one cause of spinal cord injury after 65 years old is falls. So if you know anyone over the age of 65, might not be a bad idea to do some sort of fall assessment, because a lot of those people are at risk for a spinal cord injury and don't even know it.
Are there some demographics out there that kind of look at, what is the most common sex, male or female? What is the age bracket that we see these individuals that suffer from these spinal cord injuries?
Yeah, so like in the 1970s, it was actually the average age of a spinal cord injury was around 29 years old. Today, it's around 43, and I think that's in part because people are living longer. And then in terms of sex, male, and this is kind of a large statistic, 78% of spinal cord injuries are male, and I think that's in part because males tend to participate in kind of riskier, more dangerous types of behaviors that lead to spinal cord injury. So
one of the big topics that we're going to talk about today is chronic spinal cord injury. Charlie right now, because of his injury, which we'll get into a little bit later, has been several years ago, he's considered to have a chronic spinal cord injury. And this podcast is all about talking about evidence and talking about different treatment approaches that have been effective with different diagnoses out there for the neural population. So let's start by first defining what is the difference between an acute injury versus a chronic spinal cord injury.
So typically they'll say, you'll find in the research that an acute is less than a year. And that's usually when the most deaths from spinal cord injury occur within that first year. So anything after year one is considered a chronic spinal cord injury. And I'll just elaborate on chronic a little bit. I think there's a kind of a misconception that if you're chronic, you don't see any progress. I'll have patients that say, "Oh, my doctor said after the first year, I can expect to not see any more improvement," but that's just not the case. And there's more and more research that's coming out stating that that you can still see improvement. Not even 2 years post. Look at Charlie; he's 22 years post, and he's still making phenomenal recovery. So I think a lot of that has to do with the type of interventions that are being implemented with those more chronic cases.
So let me just ask you a little bit about that. Many people, when they're first injured, they are considered having a complete spinal cord injury. And I know I've been in the field as well for many, many years, and we see as we go through the rehab process that even though the physician or the testing as they were in the hospital ICU, they were like, you have a complete injury, that sometimes that will change over and that will change to an incomplete injury. Why would that change over if they were originally diagnosed with acute? How could that change? What's the difference?
So there's two parts to that. So first, the difference is a complete injury has had total loss of sensation and motor function below the injury, whereas an incomplete has partial motor and sensory function below the level of injury. And then, like you said, sometimes people can go from a complete to an incomplete. And I think around 10%, I think after the first year, will go from a complete to incomplete. And the reason that's possible is because of something called neuroplasticity. So there's still neural activity going on at the site of injury. And the things we do, especially in therapy, can have a significant impact on that sort of neuroplasticity. So in short, because you can get very scientific about it, neuroplasticity is basically the ability of the neurons to regenerate, right? And this has been shown, even for injuries that are 15, 20 years post, there's still an ability for neural activity to take place at the level of injury, as long as the right kind of load, the right kind of stimulation is being placed on it.
Let's give our audience a little visual here. My injury is at level C4. If I were a complete injury, I could do this and maybe this. Because I'm incomplete, I can do this, and this.
Perfect, that is a great example. We're gonna take a break and we'll be back in just a couple minutes. And again, I just wanna thank our sponsor today, Restorative Therapies, and we'll be right back.
Many people with a neurological impairment cannot get the daily exercise they need in order to maintain general health. If you or somebody you know has a neurological impairment, talk to your doctor about RT300 electrical stimulation cycling. RT300 uses electrical impulses to stimulate nerves and muscles to help people get the real muscle activity they need to help them stay healthy, even from a wheelchair. RT300 will reverse muscle atrophy, reduce spasticity, improve local blood circulation, and improve range of motion. Find out more about the latest technology for neurological rehabilitation by visiting rt300.com or calling the number on your screen.
Welcome back, and once again, thank you so much for our sponsors today from Restorative Therapy. Let's get right into talking about Charlie and finding a little bit more about Charlie's story. So Charlie, can you share with us your story?
Sure.
How were you injured? Maybe how long ago?
1998. I was on vacation in Mexico with my wife. I would go out and take a daily swim. I was walking in from the swim. I wasn't doing anything silly like body surfing or anything like that. I was just walking in. In fact, the water was barely above my knees. I took a look behind me and saw a wave coming up that seemed pretty large. And you think at the time, you either jump over a wave or you duck under it, and whatever choice I made was the wrong one. So it picked me up, it dropped me on my head, and that's what injured my spinal cord. I actually, while I was under and seeing the green, I must have come to for a moment because I did something that enabled me to flip on my back, and I saw a patch of sunlight, and that must have been that moment where I got enough air in me that I didn't drown and washed up on the shore, and don't remember too much after that, but that's where I suffered the spinal cord injury.
Okay. So kind of the course of that, you were in Mexico.
Correct.
So then, and I remember the story that then you needed to get out of Mexico, so you decided to be life flighted to where?
To San Antonio, Texas, the University of Texas Hospital in San Antonio.
So then from there, did you stay there for?
I was there for 1 week. They did one stabilization
Okay.
At the rear of my neck. And then I was lifted to Henry Ford Hospital in
Okay.
Detroit, where they did a second, where then they did the stabilization on the front of my back.
So the typical course with a spinal cord injury is stabilization if need be, then ICU or in just to get you medically stable. Your breathing was okay during that time? Did you ever have a trach or anything like that?
It wasn't okay. It was borderline trach and I was in ICU for an entire month.
Oh, okay.
Because of respiratory problems, and I couldn't eat anything solid. It was actually eyedroppers of lemon water was all I could do for a while.
So then once they stabilized, you then went to rehab.
Then went to
So,
inpatient.
inpatient
for 3
rehab.
months.
3 months. And then at that point in time, what could you do when you left inpatient rehab? What was your function?
I could stand up. I could go from sitting on a mat or a bed to standing, holding the hands of my therapist. At that point, I don't think I was quite taking steps, but we were on a daily basis, we were doing this sit to stand routine. By the time I left, I was able to use my arms to feed myself. That was about it. I couldn't roll a manual wheelchair or anything. So by the time I left, I was able to eat solids and do these sit to stands. I had recovery in my legs.
So did you have a wheelchair?
I did. It was a manual chair and everybody pushed me around.
And everybody pushed you around. And did you go back to your house? Where'd you go?
Well, we couldn't go back to the house we were living in because it was 3 levels. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to make decisions.
Yeah.
So we were forced to find a ranch level apartment, and that's where I went right out of inpatient rehab and ended up being there for about a year and a half.
Okay. So that's kind of when I met you. I met Charlie in the outpatient sector. You know, one of the things is that he was very motivated and very assertive in the sense that he wanted as much therapy as we could give him and as aggressive as we could give him. And I think what's interesting with this whole story is that had to be, help me with time frame, 19, was that like 19 something or when I started seeing you?
I started seeing you, I think, in about July of 99.
So in 1999, there wasn't really any evidence with humans on what to do with spinal cord injury, complete or incomplete. There was some evidence out there with animals, with cats, where they were cutting the spinal cord injury, they were suspending them over treadmills, and they were realizing that these little back legs of the cats started moving. Now evidence is remarkable on how to rehab neuroplasticity, how to get recovery after a spinal cord injury. But back in the day, many, gosh, that was a long time ago. It's now 2020. It's now 2020 that we automatically get you up and walking you. So back in the day, I strapped Charlie over a treadmill that was used for people that had herniated discs, and I said, let's see what happens. And I think I grabbed every single employee in the building that I was working with and put him over this treadmill, and he started stepping, which was quite remarkable. With that. So today, let's go to today. So you have always been very, very dedicated to your rehab, to your exercise. Tell us a little bit about what you do now, rehab-wise, and what you do now, I guess, home exercise or exercise-wise.
Okay, well, what I do now is quite a bit different from the days you were talking about when we were 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now I have 2 days where I come to the clinic, the recovery project, and do 2 hours of pretty intensive therapy. The first hour is skilled PT with TJ here, and on Tuesday we do FES. Dr. Rodriguez referred to this as functional electrical stimulation, where we put electrodes all over my body, and I get either on a bicycle or a standing walking machine, and with the assistance of stimulation, I go very hard during intervals over the course of an hour with that. I then switch after that to an hour of upper body training, where we've introduced another innovative procedure that you brought to us called BFR, blood flow restriction. I won't get into too much in that, but it puts a pillow around your muscles and you blow that up and restrict the blood flow. And somebody else could talk about the theory, but it's greatly increased my strength in a short period of time. So that's my second hour. And then on Thursdays with TJ, we actually walk over ground. Some portions of that completely unassisted. Some of it with Teresa walking in front of me, maybe guiding and touching her hands, and TJ behind, making sure we're not crashing. And then the second hour again, I'm back with Joe, and I finish up with Joe, though it's not just upper body, we always finish up with sit to stands, which I've referenced before, but now it's doing it mostly on my own. And we've made great progress there, starting from a height of 26 inches and coming from my wheelchair up to full stands. We're now down to 19 inches.
Awesome.
And then I work out a minimum of 3 days and sometimes 4 days a week at home with your help. I have specialized equipment there, and so I still feel like I go at it pretty hard.
So, how's your overall health?
It is great. It's very good if I didn't have a spinal cord injury, but we've been around, Dr. Rodriguez has been around, we all know what it looks like with people with spinal cord injuries that don't commit themselves as much or are unable to get the exercise. So given that I do have this level of injury, I think it's fantastic. I have never been hospitalized for anything related to my spinal cord injury. My biggest problem is just that I have bladder infections, which comes along with the game. But I'm not in hospitals. I don't go to ERs. I'm not chronically ill. Feeling very healthy and strong.
So TJ, you work with a lot of spinal cord injuries. What kind of health issues do you see with this population of patients at times?
Yeah, Charlie kind of hit on it. There's a couple things, certain people who just don't take care of themselves, or unfortunately maybe they don't have the access or funds to get the therapy or education that they need. But a lot of the secondary complications you see with spinal cord injury include DVT, so blood clots. You see fractures, so after a spinal cord injury, you lose a ton of bone mineral density, and then as you age, you're going to lose more as well. So you see a high risk of fractures. You see pressure sores. Actually, Christopher Reeve, Superman, that's actually what ended up killing him was a pressure sore, and he had the best care in the world. So, the idea of pressure relief in monitoring skincare is so vital to someone with a spinal cord injury. Some other things are contractures. So if you're just kind of sitting all the time and not stretching out your legs, it can become contracted, and that can really affect your overall function. So those are just some of the secondary complications that can come along with having a spinal cord injury. So it's first and foremost important to come to therapy, to be on some sort of exercise program to address those before you're even talking like, let me get back to standing, let me get back to walking. And the idea too is a lot of this great research that's coming out, I tell people, something's coming down the pipeline, so you need to take care of your body to even have a chance, right? To be, for one, living that long. Two, is you think they're going to use it on somebody who has a ton of osteoporosis, contracted pressure sores? No. So I really, try and encourage people that, we're going to get you as best as we can without it, but if and when that comes out, we'll be ready for it.
Good point.
We're here today to really highlight and talk about the case study that Charlie's been involved in for the last 4 years. And I know that I was involved at the very beginning of that and then stepped away, and TJ has taken over on that project. But one of the reasons why I implemented it with Charlie was because there was so much clear evidence coming out in the research on incomplete spinal cord and the benefits of functional electrical stim, the benefits of body weight support treadmill training, and really the benefits of adding an intensity to exercise, that really there has to be a moderate intensity that shows an increase in heart rate, that shows that there's a change in the respiratory rate. And when, you know, we started really implementing and structuring Charlie's program based on some of those basic principles. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I know Charlie talked about what he is doing now. Is there anything you want to elaborate on the evidence or what you have added to his program to get the responses that we have seen in the last 4 years?
Yeah, so I'll first start with, you know, especially the idea of neuroplasticity and how to maximize that. One is mass practice, so repetition. So you typically need a lot of repetition. Another big one, as you talked about, is intensity. There was a recent study that came out that said, you know, when you're working somebody out, especially with spinal cord injury, and this goes for anyone for that matter, there's this idea of there's a therapeutic range for your heart rate. So you want to be hitting 70% of your age-predicted max heart rate. So a lot of times in the clinic, I'm almost always measuring someone's heart rate. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Not only are you getting the cardiovascular benefits from it, but you're also getting the increased blood flow to the area that was damaged. The other thing too, and we're trying to find different ways to implement it, but is this idea of virtual reality, and you can simulate that. But the important thing with that is this idea that the task or environment needs to be continually progressed. You know, so say you got somebody you're walking just in the clinic on tile, they're doing good with that. Now you got to advance that to uneven terrain, take them outside. You got to constantly be kind of progressing the task and the environment. Now, in terms of kind of the specific things we've been doing with Charlie, he kind of gave you an example, but I think what makes us such a great team is we'll take, you know, a couple and combine them. So right now we're doing BFR with the 600. You know, you'd be hard pressed to probably find a study that's doing that. And part of the thing is, you know, because everything we do here, we're using the evidence, but kind of in creative ways. So we're really, we hope that the things we're doing and accomplishing really motivate researchers to kind of do more research in the chronic spinal cord population. Because there's a lot of great case studies out there showing tremendous change in chronic, but we need better, stronger evidence out there. Because I think that would change, for one, the perception of chronic injury, and two, maybe the way, especially doctors, insurance companies, even the person themselves. I've had people come in and say, like, oh, well, this is as good as it's going to get, you know. And mentally, just we could spend a whole podcast on talking about the psyche of someone going through an injury like that. But that would just do, I think, more for their psyche if they can have studies to hold on to, because it's that idea that there's hope that they're going to get better. So we definitely need more research on that. And hopefully what Charlie and I are doing kind of helps that initiative a little bit.
So let's talk a little bit about the study and the results of the study that are shown on the screen right now. Can you elaborate and explain a little bit, in both you, Charlie and TJ, about what people are seeing right now in the results of the study that you guys continue to do?
Yeah, so here you can kind of see the different colored bar graphs represent kind of different dates. So the red goes back to 2015, and then all the way up until October. And I'll have Charlie kind of elaborate on the last sort of progress note we did. But as you can see, there's improvement across the board. And you know, 2015, you're talking 17 years out. Now we're 22 years out, and he's still making this improvement. The outcome measures we use to indicate this progress is gait speed, so 10-meter walk test. So that's important. That's like the 6th vital sign. You know what I mean? How fast you walk is a high indicator of fall risk and your frailty. 6-minute walk test, that's your overall aerobic endurance. 30 seconds at the stand, that looks at kind of your overall functional strength, and then unsupported standing to look at one's balance. So these are all kind of reliable, validated outcome measures that are used in the research and closely tied to people's function and independence. I don't know, Trey, if you want to elaborate a little more on the last
just real quickly, if you just kind of look like how long it took me to do a 10-meter walk. In 2015, it took me 1 minute and 13 seconds. In October of 19, it took me, I think, 27 seconds. How many feet we could travel started with probably 50 over 6 minutes. We did 198 in October, and just 2 weeks ago we gave it a shot again. We blew that out to 256 feet. sit to stands, when I first started doing, I could do 5 in a 30-second interval, and now we just knocked out 30. And then duration of standing, that's the only one that doesn't have the same kind of curve, but nonetheless, being able to start standing, I was able to stand unassisted for maybe 4-5 seconds, and then we got all the way up to 45.
Which is incredible. Charlie, tell me how your life, I'm talking your life at home, how has this, being involved in this study, being involved in this evidence type therapy, changed your everyday life?
So some very concrete answers to that is I have strived since the beginning to be as independent as possible. It's not very independent, but as possible. And one of the things that are important to me is that I move from my bed to my wheelchair, or from my wheelchair to my shower chair, and from my shower chair to my wheelchair through standing up and walking. And it's with Teresa, who's with me, and I can stand into her hands and move. And this is important to me because the alternative is using some kind of a lift. To use a lift seems dehumanizing a bit to me, but it would add 45 minutes just to our morning routine to use a lift, to get me out of bed, most importantly from my shower chair back to my chair. Because of what we're doing, because of the work we're doing here, because of the things I'm talking about, sit to stand, the reality of that is I can stand up out of this chair, walk with Teresa into my bathroom, into a shower, take a shower, stand up and walk back. We're saying, not wrapping a lift around me, not needing 5 people. This is, I think, functionally, that's the kind of thing that I'm seeing from this. But also, as I feel I'm still improving, I see the hope of living out my life and having care in my home and not being in a facility. And I'm attributing that to how hard we all work and what we've done here. And it's things like transferring myself into bed and taking my own pills and portions, little things like that. But that's what this all means to me. On a not so concrete level, it allows me to have the confidence to contribute, to be part of what we're doing here at the Recovery Project, part of Meaningful Life. But if I was unhealthy and didn't feel well and had all of that, I'm just not sure what my life would be. It's the quality of life of the things we do.
Right, and I think that is the message that so much in healthcare that we try to pass along, is that it is about, the bottom line is about the quality of life, and that is health, whatever that definition is and what that looks like. So I love your answer, that was awesome.
Progressive, effective, and focused neurorehabilitation. The Recovery Project, an industry-leading practice working to produce hope and life-changing results to people with spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injuries, neurological disorders, and other conditions. The Recovery Project's experienced, compassionate team of physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and trainers utilize the latest evidence-based techniques and state-of-the-art equipment in their Livonia, Clinton Township, and Lansing clinics to develop customized, comprehensive, high-intensity training programs for a variety of injuries, diseases, and conditions. We consistently reevaluate each of our programs and incorporate the most up-to-date techniques. We also offer an array of exclusive specialized equipment, including functional electrical stimulation, FES devices, red cord suspension training, Bioness, light gait bodyweight supported treadmill training, the balance weaver vest, and much more. At the Recovery Project, we help everyone feel fit and healthy. We understand that an active wellness journey is the process of making choices toward a healthy and fulfilling life. That's why we've developed a variety of cost-effective and accessible wellness programs to ensure our clients maintain and build on the benefits achieved during therapy. To find out more about the Recovery Project, contact us at 855-877-1944 or visit our website at www.therecoveryproject.net.
I'm excited to have Dr. Rodriguez on the phone with us today from the University of Michigan. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper and get some information and some great knowledge from Dr. Rodriguez. So thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, for joining us.
Thank you as well.
So the first question I have for you is, what is the predicted time frame of recovery for a spinal cord injury? And does it differ between an incomplete and a complete spinal cord injury?
Okay, so in terms of recovery, I'll go by what studies have shown and the evidence that has been collected from, various centers, various people with spinal cord injury. So, what the studies have shown are that at the 1 year mark, okay, you pretty much are going to recover to either like one, a more incomplete level. So therefore, if you were an A, you will have the likelihood of progressing to a spinal cord B level, or you can regain another level. So meaning if you had spinal cord level of injury at C5, you can recover to a C6 at the 1 year mark. And then, what studies have also shown is that the progress of recovery from that point forward is slower. So meaning, you still can make gains, but the gains are not as rapid and as quick as what you would have had within the first year of injury.
Okay. One of the focuses of this podcast today is looking at chronic spinal cord injury. And of course, we have Charlie here, and as you are very well aware, Charlie is an incomplete injury, and he has been participating in a case study for the last 5 years. And we're going to dive, we have talked a little bit about that, about the results already. But I wanted to ask you specifically, as his physiatrist, can you comment on the changes that you have seen with Charlie, and maybe what some of the long-term effects will be for Charlie as he ages?
So, the great thing is, with the various therapy exercises that you have put him through in the last few years here, Charlie has actually regained good, and continues to gain good strength and function. So, and since he has a chronic injury, it's very interesting because he's not just maintaining, but he's actually gaining both in strength and endurance, and the ability to even progress further. So, it's very promising because, if we can apply this on Charlie, I'm sure this is something that can be applied to other patients as well.
One of the things I've been in this field for a very long time, and one of the things that impresses me is that because of Charlie being involved in exercise on a regular basis, that he's very healthy. And can you talk a little bit about people that have spinal cord injuries, that some of them are at risk for other comorbidities or even hospitalizations, and kind of what that sometimes looks like with these type of patients?
So I think, for one, since Charlie has an incomplete injury, the great thing is we have, something to work with. I mean, we've got some muscle activation, muscle fibers, and muscle strength that we can work with. And, I think, and as he ages with a spinal cord injury, and for anybody for that matter, I think when one is aging, it gets a little bit harder to do exercise, number one. But, you also have decrease in muscle fibers, it's the normal, normal aging process where you have decreased in muscle fibers and decreased in energy and all that. So it is important to try and keep up with, as much exercise as you can to not only maintain, and like I said, it's very nice to see how Charlie has progressed forward, despite the aging and despite the chronicity of his spinal cord injury. And it helps with what we call metabolic syndrome. So people with spinal cord injury are at high risk of developing metabolic syndrome because the intake of calories does not necessarily equal the rate of expenditure of those calories. I mean, for anyone, even with spinal cord injury, it's very hard to make up for the calories that you take in. So more so in somebody with a spinal cord injury, then it's harder to get exercise in, and then you throw in aging for that matter. And metabolic syndrome is a syndrome that includes hyperlipidemia, so an increase in your cholesterol and lipids, which does increase your cardiovascular risk. Okay, it also increases your risk for high sugars and eventually developing diabetes, which also does increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. And it also increases your fat mass, which obviously we don't like because it also adds on to the risk for either getting a diabetes and lipids and whatnot worse. And when you look at this whole thing, it also affects everything else in one that has a spinal cord injury, meaning it affects breathing and respiration, it affects overall health, obviously, it affects skin, because the higher comorbidities that you have, you're at higher risk of having pressure sores as well. And then also, it leads to, I did mention respiratory issues because it can lead to pulmonary insufficiency or neuromuscular respiratory weakness, sleep disorders, breathing, which obviously, again, it's the whole organism. It's the whole organism that you're treating, and so it's from head to toe, blood pressure, heart rate, and whatnot, which does contribute to everything else aside from the pulmonary status, cardiovascular status. It can also affect kidneys and the liver, etc.
Exactly. And we see that, we see that within our population with many of our patients that even come in here for therapy. Another question for you. Let's talk a little bit about evidence in clinical trials. Can you share with us, do you know of any new evidence or clinical trials that are happening or being developed in the area of incomplete spinal cord recovery, or things that are what we should keep our eyes on that may be coming in the near future on improving neuroplasticity with incomplete spinal cord injuries?
So you are aware about functional electrical stimulation coupled with exercise. So the evidence out there does show improvement of muscle strength, endurance, etc., and the ability to exercise with FES plus exercise. That's one. And then you also have the weight-assisted ambulation. Is another one. So for those who are not necessarily able to ambulate efficiently or proficiently, without the assist of being unweighted, this is a very good way of getting people more active and actually improve their lower extremity function and strength. That robotics, the use of such I don't necessarily want to mention their names, but these robots that can assist with
Right.
ambulating, can be very helpful, whether they be incomplete or complete, because again, it's muscle strengthening and endurance. And when I talk about endurance, it's not necessarily just muscle endurance, but it's also cardiovascular endurance. So these are various mechanisms of, and there's aquatic therapy as well. We can throw that in there. So these are various ways of trying to sustain and improve strength, for standing and ambulation or activity.
Great, great. Well, Dr. Rodriguez, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with us all of the wisdom that you have. So thank you again, and we will talk to you real soon.
You are very welcome.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez.
Okay.
TJ, wanted to ask you one more question before we close up this podcast today. Dr. Rodriguez talked a little bit about some evidence out there, and she talked a lot about the evidence and the support of using functional electrical stim, body weight support, treadmill training, kind of what we've already talked about through this podcast. Is there anything that you're reading that, somewhat out of the box of what we're already doing that's coming down the pipeline for improving neuroplasticity, improving recovery of a spinal cord injury?
Yeah, that's a great question, because us doing what we do, I'll have a patient come up to me and their mother and be like, hey, there's this stem cell study, should I participate in it? And these are big decisions. But in terms of stem cells, that's something that, there's been a lot of stuff we've heard about stem cells in a lot of different areas of medicine, but one area of promise is stem cells from umbilical cords, and Rutgers actually just started a study using stem cells from the umbilical cord. I know Mayo Clinic is using stem cells from the patient's fat cells, and then there's also some stem cell research out there on taking it from a person's bone marrow. The only thing with that is, none of it is FDA approved, so the only way you're going to get a part of that is a clinical trial. So, I would caution you to just run and sign up for something using stem cells. They still need to do some research, but it's, they've gone from animal studies to now humans, and they're actually doing it in the United States. And as you know, in the United States, we have a lot more regulations. It's a lot harder to get these studies approved. So the fact they're actually doing stem cell at Rutgers like they are is phenomenal. And then another big thing, and I know Polly would probably agree with this, I think it's moving more from an external to an internal sort of fix. So we do a lot of surface FES, but there's something called like an epidural stimulator that they actually put in your body and actually bridges the gap where the damage of the spinal cord injury occurs. So this is further evidence that there is no such thing as a plateau. This epidural stim, they've done case studies where they showed one lady, and this is something that gets overlooked too, is one's autonomic function, so their bowel bladder, their sexual function, right? Awkward conversations, but it's very important to people. One lady hadn't had an orgasm in 10 years after the epidural stimulator, had her first orgasm in 10 years. There's another guy who had complete motor loss below the level of injury. After using the epidural stimulator, he was able to regain some strength in his legs and be able to do assisted stance. Now keep in mind, all this needs to be paired with therapy, needs to be prepared with exercise, needs to be prepared, paired up with the things we've kind of been talking about earlier. Because as you develop new ability, you need to kind of explore those new abilities. So again, if you're interested in those studies, clinicaltrials.gov, that's a way to kind of look up and keep up to date with all kind of the research out there they're doing. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, and I think that this is our life of what we do here, so we really dive into that research. But there are so many people out there that really are looking at different ways to get more neuroplasticity, to get recovery, and I agree with you. I think that, in the future, that there is going to be a different approach of treating people with spinal cord injuries, and it is so important to stay healthy, to exercise, and to use the tools that we have available for us right now to provide to our patients so that they can have that ultimate quality of life. So I want to thank you guys, for participating and talking about this very dear subject to me. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Restorative Therapies, for sponsoring us today, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you, Polly.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to today's Evidence to Excellence News in Neuroplasticity and Rehab podcast. We appreciate you and hope that you come back every fourth Tuesday of the month to get more of what's new in evidence and research in the neurorehabilitation world. To learn more about the Recovery Project or to find out what we're up to next, you can visit us anytime at therecoveryproject.net.